A sharp crack shattered the midnight silence, ripping through the living room. An expensive piece of pottery lay in 1,000 pieces, its dark red contents bleeding across the marble floor like a snake. It was the finest wine, but in the pale moonlight, it looked exactly like blood. A man, Jin-soo, gasped for air, his hands trembling violently, uncontrollably. At his feet, a mess of broken porcelain and tangled caviar lay like filth. And then, a sound. A sound so cheerful and clear, it had no place in this horrific scene. Ding! Ding! It wasn't the bell of a pet, calling for its master. It was the summons bell from the second-floor bedroom, where his wife, Miso, was calling for her husband. Jin-soo bit his bloodless lip and, like an animal pulled by an invisible leash, stumbled up the stairs. Instead of dialing 911, he stood before his wife's door and whispered in a choked voice, "Miso, it's finally over. Let's turn back the clock. Let's see how the life of this man, Kang Jin-soo, crumbled so completely before this cruel and bizarre night." 3 years ago, when Jin-soo first set foot in this magnificent mansion, people called him the male Cinderella. But it didn't take long for him to realize that glass slipper was a shackle. It was a bright spring afternoon, but the air inside the house was frigid. Jin-soo was on his hands and knees, wiping the living room floor. As a bead of sweat fell to the polished marble, the tip of a foot belonging to his mother-in-law, Mrs. Jang, nudged his shoulder. It wasn't a gesture to get his attention, it was the dismissive kick one gives a rock on the sidewalk. "Oh, Jin-soo," she sneered from the plush sofa. "There's still dust here. Are your eyes just for decoration?" Her voice, dripping with venom, drilled into his eardrums. The moment Jin-soo bowed his head and mumbled, "I'm sorry," he heard it again. Ding! The summons bell from the bedroom. He dropped his rag and rushed to get a glass of water, running upstairs. There, lying in bed like a porcelain doll, was his wife, Miso. On the pretext that her freshly painted nails were still wet, she watched with an air of entitlement as her husband brought the glass, complete with a straw, to her lips. "Honey, not so fast," she whined. "You're going to spill it." Her petulant voice held not a single speck of affection or respect for her husband. To her, Jin-soo was not a husband. He was simply a living tool, a convenience to replace her own hands and feet when she couldn't be bothered to move. That night, Jin-soo placed divorce papers on the dining table. It was the last shred of his humanity, his final act of defiance. But it wasn't his wife who picked them up, it was his mother-in-law. Mrs. Jang scoffed, crumpled the papers, and tossed them into the trash. Then, she hurled a thick ledger straight at his face. The sharp corner cut his cheek, drawing blood. "You need to know your place," she screamed. "Do you have any idea how much you've cost us on your credit cards? We feed you, we house you, and you think you're the king of the castle." Through it all, his wife Miso just sat on the sofa, flipping through a department store catalog. It was as if a dog were barking in the corner, her only concern was which designer dress she would wear next season. It was then that a sharp ringing began in Jin-soo's ears, a sound that would never truly go away. But it wasn't just the humiliation that was suffocating him. Miso's understanding of money was that of a child, or perhaps something far more cruel. Jin-soo had a secret bank account, a small escape fund he'd painstakingly saved by working as a designated driver late at night. It was $20,000, his ticket to freedom, and overnight, it vanished. Miso appeared at the door, wrapping a new mink coat around herself with a radiant smile. "Honey, look. Isn't it gorgeous? It was on sale." When Jin-soo, his voice trembling, asked about the account, Miso's eyes went wide. "What's the big deal? Mom will pay you back eventually. Don't be so cheap." Her innocent face was more terrifying than a devil's mask. That day, Mrs. Jiang forced him to sign a contract. Your wife spent the money, so you, the husband, will pay it back. Work more shifts at night to cover it. Jin Su's world went black. By day, a life of servitude and household chores. By night, dealing with drunks as a driver. Jin Su's body and mind were breaking down fast. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, and the insults from the backseat passengers started to merge with his mother-in-law's screams. The line between reality and nightmare began to blur. Waiting at a red light, he saw his own reflection in the window. Sunken eyes, rough skin. The ambitious young man from 3 years ago was gone, replaced by the broken shell of a middle-aged slave. How did I end up like this? He slammed his head against the steering wheel, screaming a silent, agonizing scream. And it was in that moment of pure despair, that a dangerous idea began to take root in his mind. One weekend afternoon, Jin Su witnessed a strange scene through a crack in the kitchen door. His wife, Miso, was holding something over her mother's favorite teacup. It was a white powder. Her expression wasn't her usual vacant stare, it was filled with a strange, calculating tension. Sensing his presence, Miso jumped and spun around. In her hand was a sugar cube. "Oh, honey, you scared me. I was just putting sugar in Mom's tea." She laughed it off, but Jin Su saw something else behind that smile. He saw a cold, murderous glint. Ah, he thought. Miso hates her too. She wants to escape this hell just as much as I do. He began to delude himself. And he made a decision. I will do it. I'll be the one to act. If I just get rid of her mother, Miso, and I can finally be free. We can be a real couple. This twisted conviction sent Jin Su spiraling. He truly believed he was the knight in shining armor, destined to rescue his princess. He fantasized that once the monster, his mother-in-law, was gone, the fragile Miso, his greenhouse flower, would finally lean on him. He would at last be the man of the house, the one in control. It was a sick fantasy, a perverse need for validation born from a spirit that had been utterly and completely crushed. Night after night, Jin Su began to track his mother-in-law's movements, mapping out the blind spots of the security cameras. His eyes no longer held the look of a frightened son-in-law. They held the glint of a predator stalking its prey, or rather, the glint of a hunting dog, being expertly controlled by its true master. And then came the fateful night. Rain poured from the heavens as if the sky itself had burst open. Thunder shook the mansion, and with every flash of lightning, the shadows in the living room danced and stretched like ghouls. Mrs. Jiang was especially hysterical that night. She stormed over to Jin Su as he was polishing a wine glass, pointed out a smudge, and slapped him hard across the face. The sharp crack was swallowed by the storm. In that instant, something in Jin Su snapped. He used the force of her push against her, shoving her back with all his might. A shriek, arg! And her body flew backward, her head striking the hard corner of a display cabinet. A heavy, sickening thud. And then, silence. She crumpled to the floor, motionless. The red liquid from the broken wine bottle pooled around her head, seeping into her hair. We return to the present. Jin Su, his hands shaking, opens his wife's bedroom door. Miso was sitting up in bed, leaning against the headboard. She turned to look at him, her expression so peaceful, so serene, you would think the act of murder that had just occurred downstairs belonged to another universe entirely. Miso. I did it, he stammered, his voice a grotesque mix of sobs and laughter. Your mother, that witch, she can't hurt us anymore. We're free. But Miso's reaction was ice. She picked up a nail file from her nightstand and began to shape her nails, answering nonchalantly, free? Honey, you murdered my mother. I guess I have to call the police now. Jin-soo couldn't believe his ears. What? What are you talking about, Miso? I did this for you. For us. This is what we wanted. As he stepped toward her, Miso lifted her feet as if avoiding a shard of glass on the floor, and let out a little smirk. It was no longer the smile of a clueless princess. It was the chilling, terrifyingly intelligent smile of a demon. Don't fool yourself, she said, her voice dropping. I hated my mother, but I had no intention of getting my own hands dirty. Honey, why do you think I never lifted a finger around here? I didn't want to leave fingerprints. It's so messy when a dish breaks, isn't it? Killing someone is even messier. Her eyes gleamed with cold light. Her helplessness, her laziness, it had all been a performance. A carefully calculated act to train her hunting dog, to create a puppet who would finally act out her own rage. Just then, the wail of police sirens grew louder in the distance. Miso had pressed the panic button moments ago. As the sounds closed in, her face instantly transformed, contorting into a mask of the horrified, grieving daughter. She buried her face in her hands and began to put on the performance of a lifetime. The police burst in and slammed a stunned Jin-soo against the wall, wrenching his arms behind his back. You're under arrest for matricide. He couldn't even resist. As they dragged him away, his eyes met Miso's one last time. Over the officer's shoulder, through her fake, streaming tears, she looked right at him and mouthed the words, "Thank you." And she meant it. It was a pure, sincere gratitude for taking care of two problems at once, her annoying mother, and her now useless husband. The case closed quickly, a media sensation. It was a story of a greedy son-in-law who murdered his benefactor for her fortune. The sole remaining family member, his poor wife Miso, received an outpouring of public sympathy, along with her mother's entire, massive estate. A few months later, peace has returned to the glass garden mansion. Miso lies on a brand new, even more expensive sofa, humming a tune. Beside her stands a handsome, well-built young man in a butler's uniform. Ding! The familiar bell rings. Get me some water, Miso says. My wrist is sore, I can't possibly lift a glass. The new butler bows and brings it to her. The master of the glass garden had changed, but the brutal ecosystem within it had only grown stronger. Miso sips her water, gazing out the window. She makes a mental note to send a generous sum to Jin-soo's prison account. And then, she smiles, more brightly than ever before. Inside a cold prison cell, Jin-soo holds the slip of paper confirming the deposit from his wife. A single, heavy tear falls onto the page. But then, he begins to laugh. A hollow, broken chuckle that grows into a full-blown cackle. It is the laughter of a man who has finally understood the punchline to a joke that has cost him his life. He finally sees the truth: the woman he thought he was protecting, or perhaps, wanted to dominate, had in fact been playing him from the very beginning. He thought he was the predator, but he was nothing more than a fly, caught and consumed in a web he never even saw being spun. In the darkness of his solitary cell, his laughter echoes on and on, a haunting sound that refuses to fade. And that is where our story ends tonight. Look at the people closest to you. What face are they showing you? Is it possible that they are using weakness, using helplessness, as a weapon to control you? Sometimes, the most devastating form of violence isn't a fist, but a calculated silence, a refusal to act that forces your hand. The predator hiding in the beautiful glass garden may have the most fragile, the most delicate face of all, waiting patiently for you to make the sacrifice. We hope you never fall into such a transparent trap. And we wish you a peaceful night.